Welcome to the Jets UK podcast. I'm your host, Andrews Groves, and today I'm not joined by David or Matt today because it's episode 2 of our bi-week review. We've got a couple more guests for you to listen, and we had some really good conversations, and we'll be back before the Patriots game to preview that. But before we do that, we'll just serve up a few more great interviews with some really, really good guests. Okay, so I'm joined by Sebastian Randazzo, who is the founder of the Jets UK and Ireland fan group, who we obviously know from Olivia and Matt from our friends that have appeared on the pod, and we know Matt very well. They're obviously from that group as well. So, Seb, thanks for joining us on the pod.
No worries. Thanks for having me on. I mean, I feel like I should have been here before. I mean, everyone else has, Olivia and whatnot. So glad I'm kind of making my debut here.
We apologize for making it so long. It's just the madness. Sometimes you get crosswise. You forget who is where and what. But yeah, we should have definitely got you on a bit earlier. But I think it's a good time
No.
to bring you on during this bi-week reviews episodes to really show that kind of the UK side of the perspective of our team for this year. So we'll just jump into the question we normally kick off with is how and when did you become a Jets fan?
Yeah. So it was actually kind of a bit of a weird one. So my nan went to America when I was just a little boy, and brought me back an American football that had New York Jets on. And for years, it just sat in my bedroom, didn't pay any attention to it. And then I started playing Madden on my phone, and was like, "Oh, this is a good game. Like, who should be my team?" Remembered I had the American football in the bedroom, and just from there, kind of all of a sudden, I just fell in love with the New York Jets. It was probably about 10 or 11 years ago. So when we were actually pretty good.
Right. Okay.
So I started off as a Jets fan when we were actually not too bad. I didn't understand the game too much then, but unfortunately, it's not really got much better since.
Ooh,
Um,
yeah.
so I
Bad
probably could
timing,
have
I
chosen
guess.
a better time to become a fan,
No,
but I mean, it can only get better, right?
absolutely. We got it. We are hopefully on looking on a better plan. It looks better as we stand, but it's been a mess the last 10 years. I think you jumped in at the right time then, but then I always say that the butt fumble was like a lightning rod moment. That basically was like it kind of was like
Yeah.
the beginning of a 10-year situation. So that's where we are right now. It's like kind of yeah, it's been a long time now. I can't believe it's been that long, since we were in the
Yeah.
playoffs, since those Rex years. It's just crazy how time flies. But yeah, hopefully we're on the way back up. So yeah, so back in 2014, you started the group, on Twitter. What was your thing? What was the idea that you had behind doing it? What made you do it? And how does it feel to see where it's grown up to now in 2021?
Yeah, so I mean, I started it just I was literally in maths class one day, kind of scrolling through Twitter, and I was like, "Oh, there's like why are there no Jets fan like groups here?" And it really was just like of the moment, just I'll quickly just start it, set up the page, and was just kind of posting rubbish for most of the part. But clearly, I wasn't the only one that was like, "Why isn't there a Jets page in the UK?" And like, it really amazed me how quickly the uh, the group just grew. And for a few years, it was kind of it was there, and then I think I don't know exactly when the year was that we set up a WhatsApp group chat, and I don't know if that was a good idea or a bad idea because it has not stopped going off ever since the day it was started, and I cannot believe how active the group are, and it's fluctuated between probably 60 to 100 members over the years, and every single day there are hundreds and hundreds of messages, and that has kind of been definitely the building block of the community of us UK Jets fans. But the page itself has grown strength to strength. We've been lucky enough to kind of been featured on quite a few different things. I mean, I done an interview way back with Talksport, which was the first very time, and then obviously leading up to the game now, we've had quite a few different people reach out to us, and not only like you getting the followers, not only are you getting the people reaching out to you, but you're kind of starting. People are starting to realize like, oh, like there are actually fans in the UK. Like Jets fans actually have a lot of fans in the UK,
Yeah.
and just seeing that kind of growth since me sat in maths class to now, kind of being at the game in London and people recognizing who you are, it's incredible. Like no, I would never have believed it if you'd have told me that when I first started it.
It's crazy. I mean, you could tell the strength of the Jets crowd. I mean, that was a we tried to make that a home game. You know that against the Falcons,
Yeah,
we really did, and we made a real big noise when we got that 2 point conversion. There was a real roar to the crowd. That just wasn't there at any point when the Falcons were doing anything that they were doing.
yeah.
So you could
The
really
the only
tell.
thing that matched it was the awful screech every
Oh,
time they got a
I've mentioned it
every time
many
they got a first
times
down.
to many people. Like honestly, it is a moment that will haunt me for a long time. And my friends, I mean, I was, like I said, my mates were getting very upset with the Jets D not being able to stop any of these first downs and the way that they were getting them. It wasn't like they were getting chunk plays and we had a couple of first downs and a touchdown. It was first down after first down after first down on every single drive. And so screech, screech, screech after every. You're like, goodness, like, and it's so loud. You're like, just why does it have to be
Yeah,
that loud? It's not pleasant. It's not intimidating. Like the Falcons fans themselves are probably having to cover their ears. My son, every time they got first down, he was like holding his ears. It's just
yeah.
ridiculous. It was just unbelievable. But
There was a Falcons fan next to me who hated it just as much as I did.
so what is the
Um,
point? Like I said, I don't see it. It's a terrible thing. Can't you just say first down or something, or even just put the
yeah,
volume down? It doesn't have to be that loud. But going into that weekend, we'll touch upon the weekend in a second. But going into that weekend, you guys were featured in the New York Post, which was awesome. How did that come about, and how does that feel to have that for that to happen?
yeah. So quite a funny story. So as you mentioned, you've spoken with Olivia before, and there's another guy that helps out, Kingsley. He runs a Facebook page, and we have a little WhatsApp group between us so we can organise stuff. And I received an email on the account from a guy. It honestly looked like a spam email. I initially ignored it, went back to watching TV, and I don't know what made me go back onto my emails to look at it again. And kind of was like on into the group. I was like, "Is this real or is this a spam account?" Because it was so hard to figure out. We kind of decided, oh, actually, no, it probably is real. So we responded to him, and then yeah, from that kind of it was we organised a call, answered a few questions over email, and it really was just out of nowhere. I even asked him, "Oh, kind of like, will this be featured?" And he was like, "I'm not sure, maybe." It was like didn't expect anything really. Thought I'll just answer these questions. And this was, I think, on the Monday. So at this point as well, the WhatsApp was down. I don't know if you'll remember the
Oh
Facebook or
yeah, of
Instagram.
course, yeah,
So I was trying to get hold of people, like what should I say? What should I do? Um, and yeah, and then didn't really hear much after I answered the questions for a day or two. Went onto newyorkpost.com, and there it was, kind of we were face and center. Um, that was one thing. That was one thing that kind of was like, wow, like I cannot believe that they've actually featured this in New York Post. And just a surprise in itself that it wasn't a scam email. And then when we saw somebody send a picture of the spread in the actual paper, the whole page
yeah.
dedicated to us, I was like, like what? Like it was almost hard to believe. Um, and it's like such a like I mentioned, like people recognizing you, like it is such a kind of gratifying thing when you've been working at something for like a long time. And we spoke before we on here,
Yeah.
like running a podcast is very, very hard. It's so difficult. And it comes across on everything. When you're running something for the fans, there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes than people
Yeah.
necessarily realize. And when you kind of get that small little kind of sense of, oh, people have realized we're doing like an okay job, like it really is like it's nice. It's really good. And it's kind of the best thing that happened was on Sunday, a guy that flew in from the States had spotted it in the airport and thought he'd bring it along and gave it to me in the pub.
Amazing.
So I actually have a hard copy of the
I saw the
paper.
picture. It's great. It
Yeah.
was absolutely what a great moment. Like I said, I saw that pop up. I was like, that's awesome. And then I saw the photos of you guys in the pub holding up the paper. I was like, oh, they even got the physical version of it. Someone's brought it over from the States. That's really awesome. I mean, what a great
Yeah.
moment. I mean, and it just like I said, it's nice that they said they had some creativity to kind of reach out to. They saw that there was a group there. It's in London. Let's reach out and see because there wasn't any of this kind of stuff in 2015. Like, I
No.
mean, I think it's just grown. Your group's grown, and I think overall the fan base has grown even more. Where now we're actually quite a vocal part of the thing. I think obviously David, is he's very coming from the UK, but is very much linked with a lot of this stuff in America. That helps as well, kind of that link between the two. So there's just a lot of more links between both, like our audience, our group here in the UK and the American fan base over there. So
Yeah.
awesome! It was so awesome to see. So obviously that's a really good. That was one of the highlights of the weekend, I'm sure. How was the weekend overall in terms of like the Jets UK weekend, the game aside? Let's not talk about that, but overall the weekend was pretty cool, right?
Oh, the weekend was amazing. I mean, I live in Dublin, so I actually flew over just for the game, so I didn't actually get to go to any of the events beforehand. But obviously, being in the accounts and everybody tagging us in all they were doing over the weekend,
Hmm.
it was incredible. Like just seeing the amount of time and effort that people have gone into planning stuff for the weekend, and like our event on the Sunday morning, that was months in the work. Olivia and I and Kingsley kind of really trying to figure out where was the best place to do this, what was the best way to get fans together. Do we want to be close to the stadium? Do we want to be far away coming in? And then to see the pub absolutely filled out more than half an hour before the event was even meant to start, and then there being a queue the entire time the event was running. Like it was just amazing to meet these people in person and kind of be able to have that community feel and really realize that hold on a second, like these fans are almost like a family. Like it is just incredible how everyone was like, "Oh, I know you. Oh, you're the guy from the podcast. Oh, you're the guy from Twitter. Oh, you're the guy from the WhatsApp group chat." Everybody kind of got together. Everybody had a laugh. Everybody had a beer or something along those lines, and kind of just had a nice time. And it almost made the game not really relevant. I don't know if you thought this necessarily,
Yeah.
but kind of just the whole feel of the weekend, even the week leading up, it was so good that it was kind of like we played pretty poor. We didn't get the result we wanted, but meeting everyone, getting to have those experiences, they were a win. So hopefully we'll get more wins and we'll get to see another time the Jets win in front of us. But
Hopefully, when they're pretty good, right? We want them to
yeah,
improve. And like I say, I think you're right. I think the game was. I think it definitely took a blow. Well, not a blow. It took a bit of a. It took a bit of an edge off the loss for me as well. I don't think I completely would say it was irrelevant because when I got in there and seeing back that game, and obviously we were reviewing the game on the day after with me and David, we were pretty. It was pretty rough, kind of a long
yeah,
day and emotional day, and I think seeing it was in real life was pretty hard to see it in front of us. What was on display, but I think with that we'll kick over to this team for this year's team in terms of asking some questions about that. Um, Obviously with a lot of positivity, and I think overall we feel really good about where we're going overall. But in the first 5 weeks, what's your thing? What's the thing that's been the most disappointing thing that you've seen from where you were 5, 6 weeks ago to where we are now?
yeah. I mean, for me, I mean, going into the season, my biggest concern was the corners, the secondary, and I really did expect that to be our weakness. What I didn't expect to be our weakness and be the most disappointing was our receiving core. And like I I mean, I remember when the whole conversation was, should we trade Jameson? Should we not trade Jameson? And kind of keeping him in the team was almost like, oh, like we're so stacked at wide receiver. We've just drafted an absolute stud in Elijah Moore. We've got Corey Davis, who can 100% be a number one receiver. We've got Keelan Cole, who's also a great receiver. We have all of these great receivers. I feel like we're yet to see anything kind of materialize. I mean, Corey Davis has had flashes, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
Um, but the amount of drop passes is one thing. The such little we've seen of Elijah Moore and Denzel Mims. I mean, Denzel Mims, we kind of knew what he's got, and it's just like, why isn't he playing? But Elijah Moore, like all we heard from training camp was Elijah Moore is just unreal. He's so good. He's going to be amazing. And we've not seen really any of that, and that's what's been most disappointing for me. And I mean, I guess it kind of coincides with Zach a little bit as well. You want to see Zach progressing. You want to see the receivers progressing. I don't know if the blame's on them, the blame's on the coaching, the blame's on the quarterback. But like that's definitely for me where I'm like, also it's the most one of the most exciting positions to watch. You see some
mm,
of the receivers around the league and you think, wow, like I don't know if we saw you saw the catch yesterday. Was it DeAndre Hopkins where he's just kind of
yeah,
pops off the back of someone and you think, why aren't we seeing these like incredible, I mean that isn't necessarily great receiver play, but why aren't we seeing these incredible kind of moments?
yeah.
Um so yeah, that's definitely my biggest disappointment so far.
I think in terms of we haven't got that number one still, right? We haven't got that
Yeah.
Hopkins or that top player. We've got some really good depth, I think, and I still think it's there. I think they need to step up. I still think they're good enough to win their matchups, and I do think Elijah Moore will build into the team. They need to help him bring him into the game a bit more, and they need to help Zach. He's getting open, but it's
Yeah.
just Zach's not getting to him. So it's a bit of everything in terms of why we're not seeing a lot of Elijah Moore. But the people we've spoke to, they back up what they saw in the summer. Like the people, we spoke to DJ for our first episode, DJ Bienemy. He said legit, like the cornerbacks that are doing well in the NFL now, like in the first 5 weeks, they were getting torched by him. So like if he's doing against them and they're doing pretty good in the league, he should be therefore doing well. So there's obviously something that will come along. But yes, I did definitely agree. The disappointment that especially the Denver game where they were pretty much the catalyst, the biggest catalyst for that loss and for the lack of production on that game.
Quite
Um,
funny you mentioned there about Elijah Moore getting open. The guy sat next to me at the game in London had just put Elijah Moore into his fantasy, and
mhm.
he was a neutral. And I kid you not, he was only watching Elijah Moore that game, and he was going, "He's open, he's open, he's open. Why aren't you throwing to him?" And like he is, like this is what I mean. But I don't know where the blame needs to go.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm very confident that he will show what he obviously showed in training camp. But yeah, that was a really funny moment for me actually in the game. Just this guy only watching Elijah Moore the entire game.
It's always funny when you see neutrals root for people in their fantasy team in the London
Yeah,
games. Where they start to like really like celebrate like weird in a weird way because they all they're caring about is a certain outcome for their fantasy team because they don't care about the two teams on the field. But it's very
yeah,
much indicative of the London experience, isn't it? In terms of pleasant surprises, I know you mentioned that the cornerbacks is obviously a pleasant surprise. Anything else up there in terms of that's been a pleasant surprise so far in the first five
yeah.
weeks?
I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily a surprise, but seeing the strength of CJ Mosley, I mean, he's actually come under this week, especially come under some stick about his PFF scores, which
It's
to
ridiculous.
me just I just don't understand at all. Um, but he is really kind of we saw was it 3 quarters of him, and he looked unbelievable. And the way that he's come back, and I mean, you watch that defense, and you just see that he is the leader there. He
Yeah.
is kind of captaining everyone, telling everyone what they need to do. And like I especially have a soft spot for him. He always interacts with us on Twitter and Instagram. He's a really nice guy. Always responds to whenever we kind of say something on one of his posts or whatever. So like that in itself is an off the field nicety. But watching how dominant he is in that defense, and in general, the defense has been a pleasant surprise. I
Yeah.
mean, when we saw the injury to Lawson, I was kind of like, are we now going to see a crumbling of the defense? Um, but they've played pretty good. I mean, more than pretty good actually. They played really well, which I think all of us kind of expect. The Jets are traditionally pretty good on defense. I didn't expect us to be this good this season. So that's been a really nice surprise actually. It's
Yeah.
just to hope that the offense can kind of catch up now because it's all well and good watching good defense, but we've watched good defense for quite a while now.
Well,
It's time to watch some good
exactly. I
offense.
mean, yes, you've been supporting the team for about 10, 11 years. I've been supporting the team for 20 years, and it's continued that way where, but other than a year here, the year there, the defense is the one carrying the unit, the team overall, and yeah, it gets a bit tiring when you can't put up the points
Yeah,
and the defense. It's the same story where the defense keeps on holding up, and then in the second half they can't hold up anymore because they're gassed, and then because the offense can't do anything, and then it's the same old story. So we're praying for points. We're praying for some sustained drives, some and early starts. Please give us an early start.
yeah. It's
It's
almost
just
the opposite of Gase when he used to always orchestrate a good first drive and then the rest used to go to
exactly
absolute.
that's exactly what we've been saying. It's like if Gase can put together a game plan, then there isn't really a reason why you shouldn't be able to. I don't think lack of experience matters that much. I think that probably factors in more into the in game calls and things like that in the heat of the moment. So you would think that the acumen of that team, and especially Lafleur, would be able to put together a better game plan. So, and I'm
Yeah,
sure that some of it's good. Like I think it's execution on the young team are also not executing here and there, and then GVR is sometimes getting blown up and then just completely destroys everything. That guy single handedly like can ruin a play just purely by his. Even if the other four guys are doing well, there's been plays
yeah,
where he alone is the reason why a play gets ruined. So yeah, it's just one of those things where you got to have the all things lined up. You got to have the play call in, the game plan, and then you got to have the execution on the field. So from all
yeah.
the different teams. So all the different parts of the team. So it's just one of those things where the young team's got to get together. Hopefully, in the bye, they'll be able to recoup and get that way. Over the bye, what would be the one thing that you would want to be implemented that you think would really make a difference for the team going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I think we've seen the videos of Zach Wilson training back at BYU. I think he just kind of needs to. I just want to see him kind of flashing back to kind of what he showed in the Titans, where he was kind of letting the ball rip and just getting his basics right. I think that's kind of the whole aim of this season. That I thought we're never going to make the playoffs. I just want to see the progression of Zach. And after the Titans game, we were like, oh, here he is, like he's
Here we
here. And
go.
then
Yeah,
it kind of drew back again in London.
yeah.
So I'd like to hope over the bye he kind of just tidies up some small things. I can't remember exactly what it was on Twitter, but they were showing Zach in the play action passes and like little things like that that quite obviously make his life so much harder because he's just not executing them exactly right.
Mm,
That I'd assume. I mean, I'm no quarterback. I'm no quarterback coach. I'd assume sort of things like that can kind of get ironed out a bit easier than other things.
yeah.
Just them, the basics, kind of really just zoning on Zach, and also it's on the floor as well. I mean, he actually called a pretty decent game, I thought, in London. I don't think he's necessarily to blame, but he's shown some poor. I wouldn't necessarily say decision making, but some poor kind of games. So just getting that offense to tick a little bit more. I think that's the focus. I think the defense is good enough,
Yeah.
but we're not necessarily caring about the defense. We want to see the quarterback kind of play. So
I'm
that's
all
definitely
I'm all for losing games 34-31, and just
exactly.
we're rebuilding, put up some points, but that's not going to be the case because this defense plays well, and so it's going to be one of those things where if the defense plays well and the offense plays well, we're probably likely to be on a good shot of winning the games actually, because I think we match up quite well with a lot of our opponents coming forward. I think, like I've said to
Yeah,
many people, I think we could lose any of the games, but also I think I think we're if we play our game, I think we're quite a talented unit, but just a young unit. So I think there's still pieces to be put in as well. But I really like where it's going. I think you're right in terms of like Zach, just getting him kind of more comfortable early in the game. I think
yeah,
is going to be is the big key. I feel like some of like the kind of play action stuff, while it helps, I think in the game, I think starting off with it too early can be a little bit troublesome. It's sometimes good to get him in the shotgun for a guy who's kind of just trying to settle down in each game. Maybe give him
yeah,
a bit more time to basically see the field before he has to kind of turn his head, do the little play fake, whatever it is, and then turn round. It gives him less time. There's something that we talked about with Joe Blewett on our first episode where he was saying he's seeing too much of that, where they think they should put him in shotgun a bit more, just a bit more, just to
yeah,
help him get those moments where he can get the ball and look at and get the ball out quickly. And maybe we can get those slants going, something quick going, just get him into the feel of the game. Because once he's into the feel of the game and get him into it earlier, hopefully that would provide better results for the rest of the game. So, yeah, you're completely right. It's all about Zach. It always has been about the quarterback in the first year, and they have to start finding ways to make things easier for him, and I think that'll make everything go forward because I think this
yeah,
defense is going to keep things very tight against most opponents going forward. I think there's only a few opponents that scare me, in terms of maybe the Bills and the Bucks. I think everyone else we can probably keep pretty tight games, and it's up to the offense to put up some points to try and win these
yeah,
games. But it is what it is.
and
We are a few weeks
yeah,
away. We're now a few weeks from seeing the team now, and we're heading towards the Patriots game. So we'll have to see where we go, right?
and it's always good to beat the Patriots, no matter whether you're kind of the season's done for already or you're up going
Yeah.
for the playoffs. I mean, no matter what, you always want to beat the
Especially this year
Patriots.
when they got us good in week two, right? And the whole Mac Jones as a rookie QB and the love fest that he's getting. And I think
Yeah,
some of it's warranted, but I think some of it's over the top as well. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens on Sunday. They don't scare me. I think they had a really good
yeah,
game against the Cowboys, but they don't particularly scare me. I don't think that if we play well, that we couldn't come out with a win. But that's
definitely, yeah.
that's to be said if we're going to play well when Bill Belichick is scheming against you. So we'll see what happens on Sunday.
That's
But
that's the thing. He's the one to worry about. I don't think any of the players. I think he's the one that
he's always the one.
is.
He's always the one until he retires. He's always going to be the one, isn't he? And that's just the life of a Jets fan is waiting for him to
Yeah,
retire. Now that it's one part has gone, that's Tom Brady. Now the other part, it's the two-part prong. You've got. Yeah, well, we're halfway. We've got one foot out of that problem. We've still got another half in it until Bill Belichick retires. So it's the life
exactly.
of a Jets fan, as we know. We're pretty far into this life. But Seb, thanks for jumping on the pod. It's been really, really good to
Absolute
chat with
pleasure.
you and get to know you.
And no, thanks again for having me on. I mean, great experience. Nice chatting to you, and always nice to reflect on that London game. I mean, despite the loss. I mean, it was a great week. So it'll
Yeah,
always be a fond memory. So
it
great
was
to relive it again.
absolutely. It was a really, really good weekend. And it's great to have you on as you repping a group that we're very fond of and we're very close with. So with that, I think we'll head back to the next segment. Okay, so we're joined by Dalbin Osorio, who is a TOJ contributor for many years and a kind of a bit of a stalwart on Jets Twitter. So, Dalbin, thanks for joining us on the pod.
Thank you for having me. Man. See, this is we would have done this in person in London,
Yeah.
but I'm glad we got to do it. We got to do it anyway.
This was to the listeners. He was the guest that I was looking to get before the game. That Dalvin had to cancel for personal reasons, but we had to get him on the pod eventually, and hopefully we'll get him back doing a live recording when he comes over to London eventually.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to it, man. And I loved our conversation before jumping on. Which honestly, like nobody will ever hear that, but that's a really good conversation for
Yeah.
Jets Twitter to be a part of.
The mystery conversation of what we talked about. Yeah, no, but we'll jump into the Jets in this season. But first, we'll jump into where you started. What was the kind of the reason why? When did you become a Jets fan, and what was one of those early memories that you remember as a young Jets fan?
Yeah, totally. So my grandfather, a Cuban immigrant, I mean, my dad, for all intents and purposes, he lived in New Jersey, and my brother and I had gone to visit, and he said he had sat us down, and he's like, "You both need to pick a football team, and you need to pick a football team now, right? Because we both were Yankee fans, and my brother liked the Knicks, I liked the Bulls in basketball, but he said you got to pick a football team, and I picked the Jets because green was my favorite color as a kid." And I will say that 30 plus years of fandom, I don't regret it, but there's been moments where I've wanted to bang my head against the wall and like kind of curse myself off for not liking blue or red, like the Giants, right? And my brother has not let me live that choice down. He constantly reminds me that I could have been a Giants fan. But you know what? I will tell you, man, the Jets have brought me some really really great memories, like just as a kid, from the 1998 season with Parcells, right? Curtis Martin's one of my favorite players ever. I got to see the greatest cornerback to ever play the game in Darrelle Revis, Nick Mangold, Jabrickashaw Ferguson, the ageless wonder that is Calvin Pace, who I know is a TOJ favorite. But so for me, it's interesting, man. So I was following Joe on Twitter for a while, because and Twitter can be a cesspool sometimes, right? But what I love about it is that like this conversation between you and I doesn't happen without Twitter. Just does not happen, right? Us planning to connect in London doesn't happen without Twitter. So when it works well, it's magic. And so Joe was looking for writers to, expand like the TOJ writing roster. And myself, Connor, and another writer, Cole Patterson, applied to all right. They hired all three of us. And they gave us undrafted free agents. That's what we were doing. We were doing UDFAs for like the first 2-3 months that we were hired. That was in 2009. That was in 2010. Sorry, that was in 2010. It is now 2021. It's 11 years later. I've been able to launch a draft centric website for TOJ, which didn't exist when we were doing TOJ. Joe and I used to do the TOJ pod on Google Hangouts, right? That's how we used to do them back in the day.
Some of the audio was rough. Some of the audio was rough, dude.
Oh yeah, the audio was rough. The video was rough. The Q&A didn't work. Like it was, But to see how far it's come, Andres, for me, I couldn't be more excited because I think that there is. I couldn't be more excited, not just for what we've done, but to see how many quality pods, right, have come out, right? So like I said this to you before we came on, like we were talking about like David's love for offensive linemen, right? But like you guys know the game, and that's exciting for us too, because I think very often what Twitter does is you get a lot of groupthink sometimes, right? So somebody says something and then somebody's like, oh, that's my idea, and then they put a twist on it and suddenly it's their idea. What I loved about both of you guys, and you were sharing this with me before we started, was that the American football is huge in London. It's huge, right? It doesn't rival, football in the sense of like, there's no gang fights or anything like that. But it's huge in terms of like just the knowledge base that you guys have. And so that's been the best part for me, is when like folks reach out to me and they're like, hey, do you want to jump on this podcast? I'm like, hell yeah. And I get to talk to you about football for 10 to 15, 20 minutes. Absolutely. But 10 years later, here it is, 11 years later, I'm still with TOJ, and I couldn't be more thrilled to see where we go from here.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to be up for it if we're watching the primetime games at 1 a.m. in the morning, you know. The best games that you really want to watch, you got to really commit to it,
That's true.
mess up your next day of work on a Monday morning. So there's definitely a passionate fan base to be done, you know. And when the Jets eventually are one of those teams who do get picked up for Sunday night football, Monday night football once in a while, that's going to be something that the Jets community in the UK are going to have to get used to. Not the 6 p.m. games that we're used to, which are the 1 p.m. games there.
Yeah.
We're very used to our 6 p.m. primetime games, kind of nice time in there. But hopefully we have some sleepless nights ahead with the Jets actually being pretty good. So yeah, you covered your time on TOJ, and it's just been a great development with you and Joe and the other guys kind of developing that. This year now, we move into this year, there's a lot of optimism coming off very rough 2 years with Gase. Kind of, I think before the season started, there was so much optimism. Where do you think is your biggest disappointment after 5 weeks now compared to where we were at the beginning or just before the season started?
Yeah, so before the season, I had them like 7-10 or 8-9, like something like that. And I will say I haven't wavered on that. I think that when you look at the Jets, they're the youngest team in the league, right? An offensive line that is breaking in 2 new starters, including 1 rookie. They didn't upgrade one of the guard positions, right? So they brought back one of the worst starters in the NFL at the other guard position. And they're starting a rookie quarterback, a rookie running back, a wide receiver who had never been a wide receiver 1 before, right? Never been the most targeted guy in an offense. No tight end to speak of on this roster, right? A rookie superstar receiver in Elijah Moore, who I think is going to be a stud in the NFL, right? Denzel Mims, a second-year receiver who was raw last year and really just made a lot of plays off of raw talent, really. His routes weren't as crisp. He didn't know how to use his hands yet, but it was just really a lot of talent, right? He signed Keelan Cole, kept Jamison Crowder, all that stuff. The defense threw a bunch of dart throws at cornerback, but you only had 1 starting caliber cornerback in Bryce Hall. A returning C.J. Mosley, who I had high hopes for and who I think has kind of silenced a lot of the doubters in the first 5 games, right? A defensive line that signed Carl Lawson to a big deal and then promptly saw him tear his Achilles and lose another year, right?
Yeah.
You have Marcus May in a contract, situation where he might not be here past the deadline, all of that. All that to say that, like, if you really think about it realistically, this team being 1-4 with a win over a team like the Titans who had been in the playoffs the year before, that's not that bad. I will also say that the team hasn't given up. They've been in pretty much every game except for Denver. Even the New England game, right? Like, Zach Wilson played terribly in the New England game, 4 picks, but they were like, if he doesn't throw 4 picks, they're in that game. Mac Jones didn't really do much. The Patriots don't have a lot to write home about on offense. The Jets are a better offensive team. They have more talent on offense, right? It's just Zach Wilson played a terrible game. So to answer your question, the disappointment, I think, for me is in just how inflexible the offensive scheme has seemed. And we talked about this before we came on. Mike LaFleur talked in the offseason about the really good thing about this scheme. His exact quote was, the really good thing about this scheme is that we tailor it to our players, not the other way around. That has not seemed to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
That has not seemed to be the case. There's a really like wild usage of Denzel Mims in this offense, which I'd understand if you had like a Pro Bowl tight end, right? So then you were using, like 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a fullback, a halfback, like this throwback kind of formation or whatever. But you don't have a functional tight end on this roster. You don't. Like none of these guys should ever play, right? And you're the depth, you had said this, the depth is at wide receiver. You have Elijah Moore, like I mentioned, Corey Davis, all these guys. Flood the field with pass catchers. Make it easy for Zach. Make it so Zach is C receiver, hit receiver, C receiver, hit receiver. So that's been the biggest disappointment to me. But I will say, and I had said this a couple weeks ago, and some folks in Jets Twitter mocked me for it because they were like, well, how important could he really be? The death of Greg Knapp, I think, has impacted this offense greatly because Mike LaFleur is now forced to do much more quarterback coaching than he really was supposed to do. Like, he's supposed to be coaching up the entire offense, while Greg Knapp was supposed to be the guy sitting with Zach Wilson like, hey, look.
And Calabresi.
Don't throw that ball. This is not what you're supposed to do. And Greg Knapp has such an extensive track record with quarterbacks in this league, right? Mm-hmm. From Steve Young, right? Like Peyton Manning. Like, he has, so there's nothing that he hasn't seen. And I think LaFleur it's taken him a little bit to find his legs. Now, I will say he called a really good game against Carolina, the really good second half against Carolina. I thought he called a really good game against Tennessee. And I did think that he called a really good game against Atlanta. It's just the execution was off. The drops. Zach Wilson has been victimized 15 drops already by Jet receivers, right? Like, so you're talking about receivers are dropping the ball. Corey Davis has been the biggest culprit in that, just not holding on to the ball and killing drives because of that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the plays will be there, man. I do. I think that they'll be there post-bye. I think their schedule tends to lighten up a little bit, right? And Zach Wilson's starting to look a little bit more comfortable, because even in the Atlanta game, I do not think he looked uncomfortable in the second half. I thought that when they went to more up-tempo stuff, he looked good. I thought when they went to more no-huddle, he looked good. I thought when they went to more hurry-up, they looked good. And that's what you want to see from LaFleur. More of that and less of the stubbornness of like, no, we have to go out there, with two wide receivers, split receivers, and a tight end. Another thing, and I will say, and this ties into that, we have not seen many variations in formation, right? Like, you haven't seen Corey Davis in the slot, right? Which I think you could do.
Yeah.
Utilizing Denzel Mims as a Marcus Colston big slot. That's something else that you can do. And the Jets receivers are all good run blockers. So I don't think you need to use a tight end to block when you have receivers that can do that. Denzel Mims, good run blocker. Corey Davis, good run blocker. Jamison Crowder, good run blocker. So you can still run your offense. But that's been the biggest disappointment for me, the stubbornness from LaFleur so far. And one last thing. The stubbornness from LaFleur, but I think it needs to be put on Robert Saleh. And that's something that's like, it's really wild to me in Jets Twitter. It's like Robert Saleh is the head coach and he gets absolved of all the blame of Mike LaFleur. LaFleur gets all of it. And it's like, Robert Saleh's the guy. He's the guy that you hired
boss,
and you're paying this money. He's the boss, right? So if something needs to change, it needs to change for him. He needs to go to his offensive coordinator and say, hey, listen, man, we are not going to do this. Because if we just wanted a glorified defensive coordinator to be in charge, we'd bring back Rex Ryan.
Yeah. No, I think it is on Saleh, and I think he is going to be working with LaFleur to try and work on it. I don't think he's just leaving him to do it. I think the Jets fans want to pin it on LaFleur because he's kind of responsible for the offense, but I think Saleh's responsible too as the kind of as he's overseeing everything. So and I think he does take that responsibility. He said he's gonna work his tail off to fix what's the issues are happening, and hopefully they do address some of the issues and they see some of the things that are pretty glaring to us who look at the film on week to week. I mean, they've got to be seeing it too. And seeing what works and what doesn't quite work with the personnel that's available.
Absolutely.
You can't always have the team that you want to have. Sometimes you've got to see the players you've got and say what's going to work with what we've got this year. Because it's a building process. We're still building. We can bring in the tight ends and down the line and do all that stuff. But for now, if the depth is in the receiver, let's feed that. So I'm with you on that one. Yeah.
Well, and the thing too is that if you have ebbs and flows, right, ups and downs, that's also expected. This is a young team, right? Like, their number one receiver is 25 years old, right? Corey Davis may seem like he's like the veteran realistically because he's been in the league for 4 years, but he's still only 25 years old. And so it's going to take time for this team to really get to the point. But I will say, the ceiling that Zach Wilson has, the throw that he made against Tennessee, is a throw that we have not seen a Jets quarterback make in our lifetime. It's just not a throw that Jets quarterbacks make, right? Like him calling his shot, throwing it off platform to get the ball to Corey Davis, and Corey made the catch. Eventually, he's going to get to the point where he's consistent enough to make that catch all the time. But you have to be excited by what you've seen from Zach Wilson, because the good has been really, really good. The bad has been really, really bad, but the good has been really, really good.
So it shows where his ceiling is, and I think that's what we'll go over to the more positive side of it. What's been a pleasant surprise for you in the first 5 weeks?
Honestly, the corners, man. Bryce Hall. I think Bryce Hall is one of my favorite prospects during the draft. And then he got hurt at Virginia and kind of fell off people's radar a bit, right? But he has been shut down. And it was interesting. I don't know if you remember, but in the offseason, Blesson Austin was like, I'm always playing for a new contract, right? And then he got cut. Bryce Hall is the one that like really should have been talking if we knew that he was going to have this kind of season. But I think he's been a monster. Him, CJ Mosley, and Sheldon Rankins. I think Sheldon Rankins is reminding people how good he was, right, when he was healthy. CJ Mosley's reminding people, like, listen, at worst, he was the third best inside linebacker in the game when the Jets signed him. And Bryce Hall's reminding people how good he was at Virginia, right? So now you have three guys on a mission to remind folks. And then you have John Franklin Myers, who's just exploded. But I've really been impressed with Bryce Hall. I think that, because I think with CJ Mosley, I'll be honest, like, I expected him to play up. I mean, his body recuperated after a year. He lost some weight. And he's in a linebacker-friendly system with a lot of talent up front. with Sheldon Rankins, I also thought, I was like, you know what? You get him in a system playing next to Quinton Williams where he's not facing double teams all the time. And actually what you're seeing is that Sheldon Rankins is the one that's kind of eating a lot of these double teams, which is letting Quinton match up one-on-one with the guards and centers and stuff. But Bryce Hall, man, he's facing, again, he faced Cortland Sutton again in the Denver game, DJ Moore in the Carolina game. Calvin Ridley was out last week, right? So you didn't get him, and so was A.J. Brown. But Sutton and DJ Moore are two of the better young receivers in this league, and he held his own against them, man. The Robbie Anderson touchdown that they gave up deep wasn't on him. It was on Michael Carter II. So I think the defense has punched above their weight. And so if we're gonna ding Salah for the offense, I think you have to give credit for the defense, because the defense has been much better than I think a lot of people, myself included, anticipated. Because I thought for sure, I was like, these cornerbacks are going to get cooked repeatedly, right? And coming out of the bye, right, you get New England again. Mac Jones didn't play very well, but then you get Cincinnati with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right? That's going to be a very interesting matchup.
Tyler Boyd,
there's
multiple quality receivers. That's going to be a real test.
So that's going to be the biggest test, I think. That's going to be the biggest test.
That's because is really going to see where they test their mettle. I mean, the team is young on both sides, and I think I've said this on some of the other interviews that we had on the last show. It's LaFleur's inexperience compared to Salah's experience and Olbricht's experience is where the difference between, I think, the units are, where both the players on the field are young, but the difference is the inexperience in the coaching is probably making the difference, in the quality of what we're seeing on the field at this point. So hopefully, LaFleur will start to kind of earn those scabs and get those things right, and eventually he'll make the right choices. I think what was worried about was the opening, kind of the game plan from LaFleur.
The opening script, right?
I think, and so until this past week, I think the defensive guys have had the right game plan for the team they have. I think they got it wrong in England when we watched the game. I was like, why is Jeff M dropping into the field and covering people coming out? They were getting a bit too fancy, but overall, I think they've nailed kind of assigning where the weak spots are on the offense and attacking them. And so I think that's the difference between the two units. And you can see almost every single interview that I've spoke to have said the same thing. It's very much like we were lower on our expectations for the defense because of some of the worries, especially the defensive backs, and we were really high on the potential of a Shanahan system coming in with all the players coming in.
And with the depth of the receivers, right?
Yeah,
this is more depth at receiver than we've had in a really, really long time. I think, too, you hit the nail on the head. I think the veteran coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball can help mitigate some of these issues. But I agree with you. They did not have the right game plan for Atlanta. And Arthur Smith took Robert Saleh to school in the sense that, Matt Ryan was not taking time in the pocket. It was literally 3-step drop, get rid of the ball, right, to mitigate the pass rush. And so that way, because also in this NFL in particular, it's so easy to play offense now. It's so easy to play offense, right? Like anybody, Carson Wentz, his body is broken, and he threw for 340 yards on Monday Night Football the other day. Right, Daniel Jones last week threw for 400 yards. Daniel Jones, realistically, is probably might not be an NFL quarterback. So it's just so easy to play offense now because of penalties and things like that. Like we saw the deep ball from Zach to Moore when the pass interference on AJ Terrell. The Jets should be doing that at least once a game, taking deep shots, trying to get a penalty or something, because that call always comes in. But you're right. This was the first game that I thought, wow, you guys were not ready. Because even against Carolina, man, the thing that saved Sam Darnold was Christian McCaffrey. That's what saved Sam Darnold. Because there was a lot of times, Quinton Williams was in the backfield, right? Like you kind of started to see the Jets start to get to Sam a little bit, right? But McCaffrey was there as a safety valve, right? Against New England, nothing could save Mac Jones. Mac Jones was only throwing it 5 yards downfield. It wasn't a thing that was happening, right? Against Denver, even Teddy Bridgewater didn't play that great. It was really more of the running game that was really an issue, which again, in our lifetime, the Jets have always been able to stop the run game, right? So that's different for us in this sense. But you're right. Against Atlanta, they did not have the right game plan at all. It's almost like but also Matt Ryan's a veteran quarterback. He knew what to do. He knew where to go with the ball. He knew where to take advantage of matchups and stuff. So it's a tough matchup for them.
It was the difference in the game on this past Sunday was just the quarterback's experience and in dealing with the game. As simple as that, really. Matt Ryan seen it all, done it all, and just knew exactly what to do. And the game plan was great. And Zach's game plan wasn't terrible. I think they put together, like I said, a pretty decent plan, and he just didn't execute in his part sometimes, and sometimes it was on some of his teammates. So I think it's coming together. I think it's coming together. We're not far. There's lots of little things to fix, as we've kind of addressed in a lot of these chats. I think we're all feeling quite the same, where we think we're getting there bit by bit, and I think it will come together in the second half of the season. What's your kind of the one thing you would choose if you had to pick one thing to kind of make a change and say, I want to make this change, and have the choice to make that change happen,
Yeah.
that you think will right the team, put the team in the right way, in the right direction, what would you choose?
To never play Ryan Griffin, Tyler Croft, or any tight end that the Jets have on the roster.
All right, okay, tight end.
Yeah, that no tight ends, man. I think that the NFL generally, and I said this a couple times in draft season last year, the NFL generally is moving towards what we call positionless football, where it's really just the 4 best pass catchers that you have, or the 5 best pass catchers that you have. Doesn't matter if they're a tight end, doesn't matter if they're running backs. Like Carolina does that. Joe Brady does that. He plays Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrence Marshall, and I want to say like one of the tight ends that he played. So that's 5 pass catchers. That's all he does, right? And he does that a lot. Like he puts Christian McCaffrey in the slot. Maybe he puts him on the inside slot or outside, out wide, all that. The Jets should do the same thing. The Jets should go out there and run out a team of pass catchers with Corey Davis, Keelan Cole, Jamison Crowder, Elijah Moore, and Denzel Mims. Those 5, if you want to go 5 wide. You want to go to running back, put Michael Carter in there, and then just kind of rotate guys through. Because what that'll do is, I think the Jets, they have Corey Davis has speed. Denzel Mims has speed. Elijah Moore has speed, right? Jamison Crowder can find soft spots in his zone, and Keelan Cole has shown that he can do that too, right? You want to get guys in space, right? And I'm talking about like actual space, not like what Connor Hughes talked about on Twitter with the Kadarius Toney reception, where he was like, "Oh look, the Giants got him the ball in space," when it was really just Daniel Jones threw it into triple coverage and Kadarius Toney made a move. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actual space, right? So you get Elijah Moore on a drag route. Maybe you get Elijah Moore on an inside post. Maybe you get Elijah Moore on an end. Maybe you get Corey Davis out of the slot running a post out, where Zach can hit him, right? Like you want to get a differentiation of routes, because right now it's too often it looks to me as if it's literally the same routes. It's a slant. Like I saw them throw a slant to Corey Davis against Atlanta. It's the first slant I've seen them throw to Corey Davis. It's the first one, right? Mm-hmm. Like you got to start to differentiate these routes, because you said this and you're spot on. The depth of this offense is at wide receiver. And they're all good enough run blockers that you don't lose anything by never playing a tight end ever again. Tyler Croft gives you nothing as a pass catcher. The other one, Ryan Griffin, gives you nothing as a pass catcher. So that's what I would do. That would be the one switch, because I think that could open up the offense a lot. And it allows for Zach to have easier throwing lanes, because he's throwing to the guys that he threw to in training camp. He was only throwing to Denzel Mims and Elijah Moore and Corey Davis and Keelan Cole and Jamison Crowder. He didn't throw to Ryan Griffin, because you never used them in training camp or anything like that. And I think Zach needs to get comfortable with the guys that are going to be here long term, and I don't think Ryan Griffin and Tyler Croft are going to be here long term.
No, I think your positionless football idea is there. I think when one of my co-hosts, Matt, he has been banging on about Mims playing the tight end position as a pseudo tight end, where he would hold up as good as the other guys in inline blocking, but then what he could do when you put him out in space and actually testing, they were using these tight ends to kind of try and pull the defense out of position. It's like they just didn't have the speed to do so, and having someone like Mims do that would make way more sense. It's just, I don't know, I think they're just kind of quite worried about the protection for Zach, and it's like they're being a bit too overprotective. I think if the line continues to hold up decently, obviously it's not perfect, but very rarely you're going to get a perfect game from an offensive line with the defensive lines they have to face. But if they do a decent job holding up, then you have to then open things up and give more options, because so often you're basically just seeing 2 guys run out there on their routes, and there's like 7 guys drop back, and it's like, where does Zach throw the ball? Nowhere. He just dumps it off to Michael Carter, who makes 1 yard, gain and gets blown up on it. And that was what happened on Sunday. So last Sunday. So it's kind of, you've got to kind of trust the line. If they're doing well, you've got to help. You can't keep having guys blocking no one when they're dropping everyone back. When we end up having people stand there, I know plenty of people pulled up on the film, obviously coming from the TikTok kid, basically where the two Titans are basically blocking no one. But I mean, it's happening over and over again. I mean, I've seen Connor do it in his film. Mention it. I've seen Joe Blewett mention it in his film. Like anyone who just puts on the film for 1 second, you're saying, yeah, these Titans are basically blocking no
It's very
one.
clearly what the problem is.
They're
Well, and
literally,
I think too, this is an offensive line that's playing without their best player. Mekhi Becton isn't in, right? So like they've been doing really well considering Becton hasn't been in there. Rich Simony showed the pass block and run block win rate, and AVT is in the top half of guards. Morgan Moses is in the top half of guards. Fant is in the top half of Moses and Fant are in the top half of tackles. McGovern is average, right? Like kind of in the middle for centers. But again, you take that if Greg Van Roten wasn't the 60th best blocking guard in the league. Like that is terrible. That is absolutely awful. And it makes McGovern's job harder. And I will tell you, when the Jets signed GVR, I wrote the reaction to TOJ and I was like, listen, in Carolina, people thought the Matt Paradis signing was terrible, but it was because he had to cover for Van Roten all the time, right? And that's kind of what you're seeing now with McGovern, because McGovern, I think he's been better the last couple of weeks, but I think it's also because what you're seeing is the Jets are running more to the Fant AVT side than they are to the GVR Moses side, right? So they're running more to the left side of the formation, and that's allowing for McGovern to maybe like get out in front of runs, right? So he's able to clear some stuff out because he trusts AVT to do his job. I don't think he trusts GVR to do his job. And that the Jets, they're close, man. I will say this. I know a lot of Jet fans like to be negative and all that, but they're close. They are very, very close. There were plays there to be made in the Atlanta game, and they are close. They also haven't been forcing turnovers, right? So that's again something to pay attention to. Like at some point, things will adjust. We're right now at the 5-week mark, and this is again the 5-week mark after having really no preseason, right? This offensive line did not play together at all this preseason. The Jets are close. I think you're going to see a much different team come out of the bye, and not even a much more different team, a much more productive team, because I do think there's been plays there to be made. It's just they just haven't made them because they're a young team.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that completely. I don't see the rest of our schedule and see that many to worry about. We looked at the schedule on our podcast the other week, this past week, and I went through it and I thought, yeah, the Bills twice, Tampa. Everyone else, I think, is beatable. Yeah, I think we could also lose to anyone, including Jacksonville. Like if we play as badly as we can as a young team. But I think from a talent point of view, I don't think we're that far off. I think it's execution more than talent at this point. Where
I agree.
I think even because I think the schemes are much more advanced than what we were dealing with offensively than what Gase was putting out. I think that the defensive schemes are more cohesive than what Greg Williams was doing last year. And I think the players are built for that. They already brought in a good amount of players who kind of fit the formation quite well. Yeah. And then I think it's just that the talent will show out. I think the young talent has to just eventually arrive, and that's what we're waiting for. And we just have to be patient. That's all it is. It's patience, because I think this feels different to other years. It really does. As much as it's frustrating, because I knew we could have beaten that Falcons team.
Yes.
They were so beatable. I mean, obviously without Calvin Ridley, but still, they didn't even do that special. We beat ourselves, and we've done it a few times. So that's a sign of a young team, is you beat yourself rather than the opponent being better than you. But Dalbin, thanks for joining me on the pod. It's been really great having you on. Listened to you very many years. I know a lot of my listeners are probably very familiar with you for over the years as well. So it's been really good for you jumping on. Before we head off, do you want to shout any of the work that you may be doing for TOJ? Anything that's coming up? I know you got draft season coming up. When's the premiere date for draft season?
Yeah, so draft season returns on October 25th. Yeah, I have that right. October 25th. And so we'll be back then. We're also launching the TOJ specific draft site, the draft season site that's a companion site to TOJ, where you guys will be able to see big boards, scouting reports. It feels good to not have to really care about the quarterbacks this year.
Finally.
and focus on everybody else. And I know you mentioned David loves Tyler Linderbaum. He is high on our big board. Evan Neal's also high. There's a good draft class for the positions that I think the Jets need. Again, if they're gonna go, try and get another edge, add a corner, potentially, maybe go receiver. Maybe they add another receiver. I don't think so, but they might. You just never know. But it's a good class for what the Jets need, including on the interior offensive line. But yeah, no, you guys can follow me on Twitter at DA_Osorio. More than happy to chat football with you guys. And we will get out to London and do this in person soon, Andres. I promise, man. This was a lot of fun.
No, it was really, really, really good. So with that, we'll head over to our next segment. Okay, so we'd like to thank Seb and Dalbin for jumping on the pod. That was really good, really great conversations, great guys. Thank you so much to them. That was fantastic. And we'll be back later in the week to preview the Patriots game. Hopefully a little bit better than what we saw in week 2. So hopefully they do get a few things sorted out that we talked about on these bi-week review episodes. So guys, enjoy the rest of the week and we will catch you later in the week.